1 year after my husband died, I finally made the decision to renovate his old office. I told myself it was time. Time to stop treating that room like a shrine. Time to turn it into something useful. Maybe a small library, somewhere the grandchildren could read when they visited. I never imagined that one simple decision would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. The call came during Sunday service. I was sitting in the third pew at St. Andrew's, hands folded, listening to the final hymn when my phone vibrated against my palm. I should have silenced it. At my age, I still forgot those small modern courtesies. But the vibration didn't stop. It felt urgent, demanding. I glanced down. Morgan, renovation crew. My stomach tightened instantly. Morgan Holbrook never called unless something was wrong. I slipped out of the pew as quietly as my stiff joints allowed and stepped into the crisp September air. The church bells rang behind me as I answered. "Mrs. Golding," Morgan said, his voice low and strained. "I'm sorry to interrupt your Sunday, but we found something in your husband's office." "What kind of something?" I asked, pulling my cardigan tighter around myself. There was a pause, too long. "I can't explain it over the phone," he said carefully, "but I need you to come here. And ma'am, don't come alone." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Bring your sons, both of them." Before I could ask anything else, the line went dead. I stood frozen on the church steps as the bells finished tolling. Don't come alone. Those words echoed in my head like a warning siren. What could possibly be hidden in Thomas's office that required my sons to be present? I called Michael first. He answered on the third ring, relaxed, distracted, Sunday morning normalcy dripping from his voice. "Mom, I'm having breakfast with Claire and the kids." "Michael," I said, forcing my voice steady, "I need you at the house, now. Bring Dale." There was silence on the line, then muffled voices. Claire, irritated, inconvenienced. "What's wrong?" he finally asked. "The contractor found something. He says we all need to be there." Another pause. "Can't this wait?" "No," I said firmly. "He told me not to come alone." That did it. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive home felt endless. Millbrook Falls was quiet, picturesque, oblivious, the kind of town where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. As I pulled onto Hawthorne Drive, I saw both cars already parked in the driveway, Michael's sleek BMW beside Dale's older Honda. They stood on the porch, tension written into their posture. They hadn't spoken much since Thomas's funeral. Old arguments, estate disagreements. Grief had sharp edges. Morgan opened the door before I reached it. His face was pale beneath his construction dust. "Mrs. Golding," said Morgan, softly, eyes flicking to my sons, "thank you for coming so quickly." "What did you find?" Michael demanded, already stepping inside. Morgan hesitated, then looked at me with something that made my blood run cold. Pity and fear. "It's better if you see it for yourselves," he said. And that's when I realized whatever waited behind that office wall wasn't just a discovery. It was a reckoning. But nothing, not in my worst nightmares, could have prepared me for what was hidden behind my husband's wall and what it revealed about the man I'd spent 40 years loving. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this unfold layer by layer, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Morgan led us down the hallway toward Thomas's office, the sound of our footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. The house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. The familiar smell of old books and wood polish had been replaced with drywall dust and exposed wiring. Thomas's office barely looked like itself anymore. The carpet was gone. The wallpaper had been stripped away. Wooden beams and raw studs showed through like exposed bones. I felt a strange ache in my chest, as if I were standing inside my husband's skeleton instead of a room. Two of Morgan's workers stood near the far wall, silent and rigid, eyes fixed anywhere but us. The wall behind Thomas's desk, the one that had been there for decades, was gone. Not opened. Gone. In its place was a narrow, hidden room. It was small, no more than 8 feet by 10, illuminated by harsh work lights. The walls were bare drywall, never painted, never meant to be seen. And lining those walls were shelves, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling with neatly arranged files. My heart slammed against my ribs. "That wall was false," Morgan said quietly. "Double-layered. We found the seam while checking for studs. There's a concealed door mechanism built into the shelving." I stared, numb. "Thomas built this?" Morgan nodded. "Years ago. Professional work." Michael stepped forward and pulled one of the files from the shelf. His face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. I grabbed another folder at random. Inside were photographs, financial records, handwritten notes, surveillance-style observations. At the top of the file, in Thomas's precise handwriting, was a single word: subject. Below it, someone's name, and then, stamped in red ink, status, closed. Dale swallowed hard behind me. "Mom, there are dozens of these." Some names I didn't recognize. Others made my knees weaken. Local business owners, a former mayor, the retired sheriff, people we'd shared dinners with, celebrated holidays with. This wasn't legal work. This was something else entirely. Then Dale's voice cracked. "Mom, I found one without a name." The tab held only a date: June 1998. He opened it and photographs slid onto the floor. I bent to pick them up, and the world tilted. A young woman, dark-haired, beautiful, entering and leaving hotels, sitting across from a man at a restaurant. My husband. Receipts followed, hotel bills, dinner charges, all dated across 6 months in 1998, the year Michael graduated college, the year Thomas told me he was traveling constantly for a case in Richmond, the year we celebrated our 25th anniversary. "There's more," Morgan said quietly, pointing to the back wall. A safe was embedded there. Michael was already examining it. 4-digit digital lock. "Mom, do you know Dad's codes?" My hands trembled. Dale whispered, "Try the anniversary." The safe clicked open. Inside sat a leather-bound journal, a stack of old VHS tapes, and a handgun. Beneath it, a passport. Thomas's photo. A different name. Michael took a step back, voice barely audible. "Mom, what kind of life was Dad really living?" But before we could even process the truth, something outside the house made us realize someone else already knew about that room, and they were coming. Before any of us could speak, before we could even breathe through the shock, a sound cut through the house. Knock. 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 Sharp. Controlled. Authoritative. Every muscle in my body locked. Morgan glanced toward the front window and went pale. There's a sheriff's cruiser in your driveway." My heart dropped. "I didn't call anyone," I said. "Neither did we," Michael added. The knock came again, louder this time. "Mrs. Golding," a man's voice called through the door, calm but firm. "This is Deputy Marshal Garrett. I need to speak with you regarding your late husband's estate." A federal marshal. Not local police. I felt the room closing in around me. Whatever Thomas had been hiding, it wasn't buried anymore. I stepped into the hallway before my sons could stop me. When I opened the door, the man standing on my porch looked younger than I expected. Gray at the temples, eyes sharp and observant, his badge displayed openly. "I'm sorry for the intrusion," he said. "May I come in?" Michael moved beside me instantly. "What is this about?" Marshal Garrett's gaze drifted past us, toward the open doorway of Thomas's office. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. "I'm following up on irregularities related to your husband's law firm, specifically trust accounts managed with his partner, Edward Hutchkins." The name hit like a punch. Edward had been Thomas's partner for 30 years. He'd stood beside me at the funeral, helped me with paperwork, reassured me everything was handled properly. Edward Hutchkins disappeared 3 days ago, along with approximately $2.3 million. The room spun. "Disappeared how?" Dale asked quietly. His wife came home to an empty house, accounts drained, computer wiped. He left a note apologizing. Michael clenched his jaw. "This is impossible." Garrett met his eyes evenly. "Your father kept meticulous records, Mr. Golding. Too meticulous." He turned back to me. "Mrs. Golding, I need to ask you something directly. Did your husband keep personal files on individuals, information that could be considered leverage?" Michael interrupted sharply. "My mother won't answer any more questions without legal counsel." Garrett nodded. "That's your right. But understand this. We believe Mr. Hutchkins ran because he knew what would be found during this renovation." My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text. Unknown number. "Stop looking. Some secrets should stay buried." I showed it to Garrett. His expression hardened. "When did you receive this?" "Just now." He stepped away and made a call. "I need a trace on a number and immediate security at this address." The word security sent a chill through me. Dale swallowed. "You think we're in danger?" Garrett didn't hesitate. "I think everyone connected to those files is." Before anyone could respond, glass exploded inward. A brick crashed through the living room window, wrapped in paper. Agents flooded the house within seconds, weapons drawn. Outside, an engine roared away. Garrett picked up the paper carefully, unfolding it. "What does it say?" I whispered. He looked at me grimly. "A list of names, including yours and your son's. At the bottom, written in red, everyone who knows pays the price." As federal agents rushed us into protective custody, I made a decision, because hidden among Thomas's secrets was something no one else knew I had, and it might be the key to everything. They moved us before sunset. No explanations, no debates, just orders barked into radios and a pair of unmarked vehicles waiting at the curb. My sons rode in one, I rode in another, flanked by 2 silent federal agents. As Millbrook Falls disappeared behind us, I realized something terrifying. You can leave a house behind. You can't outrun the truth. The safe house was a forgettable ranch-style place tucked into a quiet neighborhood. Beige siding, trimmed hedges, the kind of home you'd never look at twice. That was the point. "You'll stay here until we assess the threat level," Marshal Garrett explained as we stepped inside. "Agents will be posted outside. No one comes or goes without clearance." Michael immediately started pacing, phone glued to his ear, arguing with his wife, his office, his life unraveling one call at a time. Dale sank onto the couch, staring at the floor like he was afraid it might disappear beneath him. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking as I reached into my cardigan pocket. The VHS tapes. I'd slipped them out of the safe while no one was watching. 3 of them, each labeled with dates that meant something only Thomas and I would recognize. Our first home, our anniversary, the year everything quietly changed. I stared at them like they might explode. A soft knock made me jump. "Mom?" Dale's voice. "You okay?" I opened the door and forced a smile. "I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. Dad couldn't have been what they're saying. He wasn't a bad man. I know, I said quickly, too quickly, but we need to understand what he was protecting. That night, sleep refused to come. Around midnight, I noticed something that set my nerves on edge. The agent posted by the front door, a young woman named Torres, kept checking her phone. Not casually, anxiously. When Garrett stepped outside to take a call, she followed him. They argued. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the body language. Garrett was angry, defensive. Torres looked shaken. When Garrett returned, his expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Golding," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, "I need to ask you about your husband's relationship with Edward Hutchkins." "What about it?" "Did Thomas ever mention Edward's first wife?" The question felt like a trap. "She died in a car accident years ago." Garrett's pen hovered. "Did your husband ever suggest it wasn't an accident?" Cold spread through my chest. "No," I said, then hesitated. A memory surfaced. Thomas, years ago, driving home from a firm dinner. Edward's trapped now, no way out. I'd thought he meant grief. Garrett studied my face. "We believe your husband kept leverage on his partner, and when Thomas died, Edward realized the protection was gone." My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Ask Garrett about his brother. I showed him the message. The color drained from his face. "My brother," he said slowly, "killed himself 8 years ago, after a financial scandal." "And Thomas's firm handled the investigation," I said quietly. Garrett looked away. In that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't just an investigation. It was personal. And just as that realization settled in, the power went out, plunging the safe house into darkness, and someone stepped inside who didn't belong. Quick reminder, subscribe to the channel now. This story is only getting deeper, and what's revealed next changes everything. The lights went out without warning. Not a flicker, not a gradual dimming. Total darkness. Michael cursed from the hallway. Dale called my name. Somewhere outside, I heard shouting, agents scrambling, radios crackling with static. "Everyone down," Garrett's voice cut through the chaos. Before anyone could move, I heard it. A door opening. Soft, controlled, as if the person stepping inside had all the time in the world. Footsteps crossed the kitchen tile. Slow, deliberate. A flashlight snapped on, its beam blinding as it swept across the room. When my eyes adjusted, my breath caught in my throat. The man standing in the doorway was wearing a marshal's jacket, and he was holding Torres's access badge. But it wasn't Torres. It was Dr. Richard Brennan, our family physician for over 20 years, the man who'd treated my migraines, who'd attended Thomas's funeral, who'd asked gently if I was holding up okay. "Hello, Constance," he said calmly. "I think it's time we talked." Garrett had his weapon trained on him instantly. "Don't move. Hands where I can see them." Brennan raised his hands, unbothered, almost amused. "Relax, Marshall. I'm not here to hurt anyone." Michael's voice shook. "How did you get in here?" Brennan smiled. "The same way I've been getting into places my entire life. People trust me." He turned to me. "Your husband trusted me too, for a while." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "The truth," he said, "and for you to understand what Thomas really did." Garrett stepped closer. "You broke into a federal safe house. That's not going to end well." Brennan's eyes flicked to him. "You should be careful, Marshall. Your brother wouldn't want you making mistakes." Garrett froze. My stomach dropped. "You knew James," Garrett said hoarsely. "I was his doctor. Prescribed the medication he used to end his life. Thomas documented every step, every session, every prescription." The room felt like it was tilting. Thomas kept records on everyone, Brennan continued. Not because he enjoyed it, not because he was greedy. He started because he was protecting someone. He looked directly at me. You. I shook my head. I don't understand. Thomas discovered something about your past, something powerful people wanted buried, so he built leverage, insurance, a system that made him untouchable. Michael whispered, "You're saying he destroyed lives to protect Mom?" "To keep her alive," Brennan corrected. Before I could respond, the light snapped back on. Agents stormed in from every direction. Torres stumbled through the back door, bleeding but alive. Brennan stepped backward, hands still raised. Before they could grab him, he leaned close to me and whispered, "Thomas hid the final answer somewhere only you would think to look." Then he was gone, vanishing into the chaos as agents secured the house. I stood there shaking, surrounded by guns and shouting, holding on to one horrifying truth. Thomas hadn't just been hiding secrets. He'd been hiding me. And when I finally opened the file my husband kept with my name on it, I learned why someone had been hunting me for 40 years. They moved us again before dawn. A different location, tighter security, new faces, new rules. Marshal Garrett was quietly replaced by a senior officer named Cordova, a woman with steel gray hair and the kind of expression that made it clear she didn't tolerate surprises. Dr. Brennan had vanished. Edward Hutchkins was still missing, and my life, everything I thought I knew, was unraveling faster than I could keep up. Inside the federal building, they finally brought me what I'd been waiting for. The file. It was thicker than most. My name typed neatly on the tab, Constance Golding. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, as if the paper itself might bite. The first document wasn't mine. It was a birth certificate. Different name, different parents, same birth date. Margot Hins. My heart slammed violently in my chest. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Keep reading," Cordova said gently. Newspaper clippings followed, yellowed, old. Headlines from Pittsburgh dated 1968. House fire claims 2 lives. Child survived. Photographs of a burned-out home. A little girl with dark hair and hollow eyes. She looked familiar. Too familiar. "No," I said, "this is wrong. My parents were Robert and Eleanor Bradford. I grew up in Virginia." "You grew up where they told you," Cordova replied. The truth crashed over me in waves. I had been adopted, renamed, rebuilt. The Bradfords hadn't lied to hurt me. They'd been protecting me, hiding me from something so dangerous my entire identity had been erased. Dale gripped my hand. "Mom, you survived something. And someone made sure no one ever found you again," Michael added quietly. Thomas discovered the truth while researching my background before our wedding. Instead of telling me and shattering my world, he chose another path. He became dangerous. He collected secrets, built leverage, ensured that anyone powerful enough to hurt me had too much to lose to try. For 40 years, he stood between me and a past that wanted me dead. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You should have stayed buried." Cordova's jaw tightened. "They're escalating." "They're scared," I said softly, "because Thomas is gone and the protection he built is collapsing. And now they're coming for the witness," Michael added quietly. "Me." That's when it clicked. I hadn't just survived a fire. I'd witnessed something. Something worth killing over. Cordova closed the file carefully. "Mrs. Golding, Margot, your husband died 3 weeks after meeting someone who claimed to know the truth about that night." "The Riverside Mill," I whispered. She nodded. "We believe Thomas was murdered." The room went silent. The man I loved hadn't died of a heart attack. He'd been silenced. I straightened my shoulders. "I think they'll run," I said. "They think I'll hide." Cordova met my gaze. "And will you?" I thought of Thomas, of the files, of 40 years of quiet protection. "No," I said. "I'm done being buried." Because somewhere among Thomas's last secrets was proof of who killed my parents and who killed my husband. They brought in the evidence cart just after noon. 3 VHS tapes sealed in plastic, logged and tagged like weapons. The same tapes I'd hidden in my cardigan before everything exploded. Now they sat between us on a metal table in a federal conference room, a relic from another era that somehow held the future of my family. A VCR was wheeled in, old, bulky, humming like it resented being pulled back into service. "These tapes were recorded by your husband," Cordova said. "We believe one of them contains the meeting that led to his death." Michael sat to my left, Dale to my right. Neither of them spoke. I slid the first tape into the machine. The screen flickered. Thomas appeared, younger, sharper, seated in his office before the false wall existed. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and the protection I built has failed." My throat tightened. "I need you to understand why I did what I did and why you must finish what I started." The image shifted to documents laid across his desk. Margot witnessed a double murder in 1968. Her parents discovered financial crimes tied to organized money. They planned to report it. They were silenced. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. "The fire was staged," Thomas said, "but Margot survived. Someone saw her run." Dale squeezed my hand. "I spent 30 years tracking the people connected to that night," Thomas continued, "not to destroy them, but to make sure none of them ever came for her." The tape cut to black. No one spoke. Cordova exhaled slowly. "That explains the files." I reached for the second tape. The date matched something else. 3 weeks before Thomas died. This time, the setting was different. An abandoned building, a desk, a single camera angle. The Riverside Mill. "This is being recorded as insurance," Thomas said into the camera. "I'm meeting someone who claims to know who set the fire." The door opened behind him. A woman stepped into frame. I froze. "Rita Vance," Dale whispered. "My principal." Thomas looked tense. "You said you had information?" "I do," Rita replied sharply. "But if I talk, they'll kill me." "Who?" Thomas asked. She hesitated, then said the name. "James Brennan." The room went silent. Garrett's brother. Rita explained how Brennan, as a teenager, had worked for the criminals my father exposed, how he set the fire, how his family later helped bury the truth. "He's been killing ever since," Rita said. "Anyone who gets too close." The tape ended abruptly. Michael stood. "That's motive and proof." Cordova nodded grimly. "And Brennan knew Thomas had leverage on him." "That's why Thomas died," I said quietly. I reached for the final tape. Before I could insert it, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. "You're running out of time." Because the final tape wasn't a warning, it was a confession, and it revealed the man who had been standing beside me all along. My hands shook as I slid the final tape into the VCR. No one spoke. Not Cordova, not my sons. Even the agents lining the walls seemed to sense that whatever was on this tape would change everything. The screen flickered. Thomas appeared again, but this time he looked different. Tired, older, the weight of years etched into his face. "If you're watching this," he said quietly, "then the person I feared most has already made a move." He took a breath. "The man who set the Keller fire did not disappear. He didn't flee. He didn't hide in the shadows. The camera angle shifted slightly, as if Thomas wanted to be absolutely certain the next words were heard clearly. He stayed close. My heart began to pound. He changed his name, changed his life, became someone trusted, someone respected, someone no one would ever question. Images appeared on screen, photographs, documents, old records, a younger man in a uniform, a badge, a familiar smile. I gasped. "Raymond Cook," Michael whispered. "The sheriff." Thomas's voice continued, steady but grim. James Brennan became Raymond Cook. Law enforcement gave him control over investigations, power to bury evidence, and proximity to you, Constance, Margot, without ever raising suspicion. The room felt like it was collapsing inward. "He attended church with us," Dale said faintly. "He was at Dad's funeral." "That was the point," Cordova said. "Total access." On the tape, Thomas leaned closer to the camera. "He murdered your parents, he murdered anyone who threatened to expose him, and 3 weeks ago, he murdered me." I covered my mouth as tears burned my eyes. "I confronted him," Thomas continued. "I thought I could trade silence for safety. I was wrong." The tape cut to static. Then a final frame appeared. A still image, Raymond Cook standing on my front porch, arm around Thomas's shoulder, both of them smiling at a neighborhood barbecue. The betrayal hit harder than fear. All those years, all those conversations, all that trust. A knock echoed down the hallway outside the conference room. Cordova's radio crackled. "We've got movement at Mrs. Golding's residence." My blood turned cold. "They're there," I said. "He's there." Cordova was already moving. "Mobilize, now." Michael grabbed my arm. "Mom, you're not going." "Yes, I am," I said, standing. "He's been watching me for 40 years. This ends tonight." As we rushed toward the vehicles, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. "Hello, Margot. Took you long enough." And when we pulled into my driveway, the man I once called a friend was already waiting, armed, smiling, and ready to finish what he started. We arrived just after sunset. Red and blue lights painted Hawthorne Drive in violent streaks of color as unmarked federal vehicles surrounded my house. Neighbors stood frozen behind curtains, whispering, watching the quiet street transform into a crime scene. My home looked wounded. The front window was still boarded from the brick. Yellow tape fluttered in the evening breeze. The oak tree in the backyard loomed like a silent witness. "Clear the perimeter," Cordova ordered. Agents fanned out, weapons drawn. I stood on the sidewalk, keys clenched in my hand, heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Then the front door opened. Raymond Cook stepped onto the porch. Alone. Unarmed, at least visibly. "Constance," he called gently. "I heard the feds were here. Thought I'd come check on you." The voice was perfect. Warm, familiar. The same voice that had comforted me after Thomas's funeral. "Don't open the door," I said under my breath. But Cordova was already moving. "Sheriff Cook," she said, weapon trained on him, "I'm going to need you to show identification." Cook smiled and raised his hands slowly. "Of course, I understand." As he stepped forward, his eyes met mine, and something shifted. The kindness vanished. What replaced it was cold, ancient, patient. "I've been watching you a long time. 40 years is a long time to wonder if a child will remember." My knees weakened. "James," I whispered. His smile widened. "Hello, Margot." In one lightning-fast movement, he lunged. He twisted Cordova's wrist, ripped the gun from her hand, and pressed it against my temple before anyone could react. "Everyone freeze," he said calmly, "or she dies." Michael shouted my name. Dale started forward. I shook my head. Cook's breath was hot against my ear. I tried to end this quietly. Your husband wouldn't let it go. You killed him, I said, my voice trembling but clear. I stopped a threat, just like I stopped your parents. Rage burned through the fear. You became a cop, I said. You wore a badge to hide what you were. I wore it to control the truth. And then Thomas started digging. Agents surrounded us, weapons raised, frozen. I will walk out of here, or I will finish this like I should have 40 years ago. He pulled me backward toward the door. That's when I felt it. The weight in my cardigan pocket. Thomas's anniversary gift. The office letter opener. Sharp. Solid. You underestimated one thing, I said quietly. Oh? What's that? Cook sneered. I drove the blade into his thigh. He screamed, his grip loosened. I dropped and rolled away as Cordova tackled him. Agents swarmed, weapons clattered, blood splattered across the porch boards. Raymond Cook hit the ground hard, screaming, cursing, finally defeated. I sat on the floor shaking, my sons beside me, arms wrapped tight. Cook looked up at me, pain and fury in his eyes. What was my mistake? He gasped. I met his gaze. You thought surviving 40 years meant I was weak. But his arrest was only the beginning, because what he confessed next would shake our town and expose how deep the corruption truly went. Raymond Cook talked. Not right away, not easily, but pain has a way of loosening even the tightest secrets, and once the doctor stabilized him under guard at the hospital, the walls he'd built over decades finally began to crack. I wasn't in the interrogation room, but I watched from behind the glass. Cook sat slumped in the chair, his leg bandaged, his sheriff's badge sealed in an evidence bag on the table in front of him. The symbol he'd hidden behind for half a lifetime now looked small, pathetic. You want the truth, he said hoarsely. You won't like how many people were part of it. Cordova didn't flinch. Start talking. Cook exhaled slowly. Your parents weren't saints. They found the money trail. Construction contracts, shell companies, payoffs, people who ran this town. And you? Cordova asked. I was muscle, Cook replied, a scared kid trying to earn protection. He admitted everything. The fire, the cover-up, the years of intimidation. Names spilled from him like poison, city council members, business owners, law enforcement officers, even a former judge, men who had shaped Millbrook Falls while hiding blood on their hands. They knew about Margot, Cook continued. Some wanted her dead, others wanted her watched. And Thomas? Cordova pressed. Cook's jaw tightened. He was smarter than all of us. He didn't threaten. He documented. He trapped us in our own crimes. I pressed my hand against the glass. Thomas's greatest strength, his faith in people, had been used against him. The fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, arrests rippled through Millbrook Falls like an earthquake. Warrants were served, offices were raided, decades of power collapsed overnight. Edward Hutchkins was found trying to flee the country. Rita Vance entered protective custody. Dr. Brennan vanished again, but not before leaving behind records that ensured he could never resurface quietly. The town was no longer quiet. It was exposed. Michael stood beside me at the press briefing, his hands steady on my shoulder as cameras flashed. My mother survived something unimaginable, and my father died making sure the truth came out. That night, back at a secure residence, I finally slept. For the first time in 40 years, I slept without fear. But peace, I learned, doesn't come all at once, because one final question remained. What do you do after your entire life turns out to be a lie? And as I stood in my husband's empty office one last time, I realized the story wasn't over because Thomas had left me one final choice. They allowed me back into the house a week later. Not alone. Never alone. Two agents waited outside while I walked through the front door, the scent of fresh paint and disinfectant failing to erase the memories soaked into the walls. Thomas's office was last. The false wall was gone now, replaced by clean drywall, no trace of the hidden room that had changed everything. But I could still feel it there, like a phantom limb. I opened the desk drawer. At the bottom lay a sealed envelope I'd somehow missed. Thick paper. My name written in Thomas's familiar hand. I sat slowly and opened it. My love, if you're reading this, then the protection I built has finally collapsed, and I'm sorry you had to learn the truth this way. Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading. I never told you who you really were because I wanted you to live freely, not as someone constantly looking over her shoulder. Everything I did, the files, the leverage, the enemies, I carried alone so you wouldn't have to. Inside the envelope was a flash drive. Cordova later confirmed what it contained. 2 options. The first, full public release. Every name, every crime, total exposure. It would finish what Thomas started, but it would also tear the town apart permanently. The second, selective release. Enough evidence to ensure convictions of the worst offenders, while sparing families who'd had no part in the crimes. Justice or mercy? Michael wanted it all released. They destroyed lives, he said. They deserve everything. Dale was quieter. Some of their kids are innocent, just like you were. That night, I sat alone in Thomas's chair and thought about the little girl in the fire photograph, the one who survived because someone chose not to finish the job. Thomas had made that choice for me. I made it again. The next morning, I handed Cordova the drive. Selective, I said. She studied me carefully, then nodded. Your husband would have been proud. Trials followed. Sentences were handed down. The most dangerous men went to prison. Others faded quietly into obscurity. Millbrook Falls never returned to what it was. And that was a good thing. On the 1-year anniversary of Thomas's death, I planted a tree in the backyard, not as a marker of grief, but as proof that something living could grow from the truth. I finally visited the graves of my birth parents. I told them I was safe, that their sacrifice wasn't forgotten. That night, as I locked the house, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You chose wisely. I smiled softly and deleted the message. But just when I thought the past was finally at rest, a final discovery reminded me, some stories don't end, they transform. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address, no postmark that made sense, just my name typed neatly across the front, waiting in the mailbox like it had been there all along. I knew, before opening it, that this was the final echo of everything Thomas had tried to protect me from. Inside was a single letter and an old photograph. The photograph showed my birth mother standing outside the Riverside Mill, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. On the back, written in fading ink, were the words, "If anything happens to us, tell Margot the truth." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Constance, Margot, if this has reached you, then Thomas is gone, and I failed to deliver this when I should have. It was from Rita Vance. She explained everything. My parents hadn't just uncovered financial crimes, they'd found evidence tying multiple towns together in a laundering network that spanned decades. Riverside Mill was only one piece. The fire was meant to erase the paper trail and send a message. Rita had been supposed to run that night. She didn't. The guilt followed her entire life. Thomas came to me weeks before he died, she wrote. He knew his time was limited. He asked me to give you this if he didn't survive. The letter ended with a confession and an apology. And then, something else. A name. A woman, still alive, living under a new identity. Someone who'd helped my mother escape the mill years before, and who might still hold the missing piece of evidence that could close every remaining gap. I stared at the name for a long time. I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. Michael urged caution. You've done enough, Mom. Dale understood. Some truths ask to be found. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Thomas's photograph. I'm not chasing ghosts, I said. I'm finishing a circle. Weeks later, I drove alone for the first time in years. No agents, no escorts, down a coastal highway where the ocean met the sky. The address Rita provided led to a small bookstore. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with kind eyes. She looked at me once and whispered my birth name. You're safe now, she said. I've been waiting. And as she reached beneath the counter for a hidden package, I realized the past still had one final truth left to reveal. The woman locked the bookstore door and flipped the sign to closed. Without a word, she reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small metal box, its edges worn smooth by time. She placed it between us, as if it carried weight far beyond its size. My name is Eleanor Shaw now, she said gently, but once I was your mother's closest friend. My chest tightened. Inside the box were documents, original contracts, handwritten ledgers, photographs of meetings no one was ever supposed to record. Proof of everything my parents had discovered, proof powerful enough to bring down men who were already dead and others who had survived quietly. I kept this hidden for decades, Eleanor said. Your mother made me promise. She didn't want revenge. She wanted you to live. I nodded. I did. And for the first time, I truly understood what that had cost. I turned the box over in my hands and made my decision almost instantly. This ends with me, I said. Some truths are meant to destroy. Others are meant to free. I handed the box to federal authorities, not for prosecution, but for sealing. The remaining names were documented, archived, and locked away where they could never be used for power again. The past didn't need another bloodletting. It needed rest. Months passed. The house no longer felt haunted. The tree I planted grew taller. My sons laughed more easily. Millbrook Falls learned how to live without its masks. I changed my name, officially this time, not to hide, but to honor both lives I'd lived. Margot Golding. I volunteer now. I speak to survivors. I tell them something Thomas never stopped believing. You don't owe the world your pain, but you deserve your truth. On quiet mornings, I sit in the library where the office once was and read. Sometimes I swear I feel Thomas beside me, not as a protector anymore, but as a partner who finally gets to rest. The phone hasn't buzzed in a long time, and if it ever does, I know this now. Secrets lose their power when they're faced. Survival isn't silence. It's choosing what comes next.